I want to talk about dive insurance for one thing, because
Okay.
the one thing the one thing that has shocked me actually when I started diving again this year is how little people know, first of all, about what causes the bends,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
basic theory stuff, which seems to have gone to the wayside to a certain extent, should we say. And not only that, just the fact of that people think that, oh yeah, well, I'm only diving a few times a year. I don't need to bother with dive insurance. And meanwhile, a
Yeah.
chamber run, I know in Canada is going to cost you about $100,000 if you haven't got dive insurance.
Yeah. It could. I mean, especially if you're in remote locations. I mean, you are at the mercy of these facilities that will charge just about anything for treatment. But the problem with diving medicine is no one, even the research community, doesn't know the exact mechanism of injury for decompression sickness. And so, if you don't know the exact mechanism of injury, you can't determine a way to completely, absolutely avoid it. And so it really doesn't make any difference how many dives a year you make. In fact, when you look at some of the Dan data, at least one of the sets of data that I use in the webinars that I do on diving safety, it shows that people are most vulnerable when they have very few dives. So,
Really?
so if they have less than 20 dives, they are kind of overrepresented in the injury and fatality databases because they have limited experience, and sometimes they get themselves in a situation or in an environment that's far beyond their capabilities. But then on the other hand, you get people who, in the same set of data, that have over 300 dives in a year. And still have a problem with either decompression sickness or diving fatalities because they're either overconfident or they just don't follow the same rules. In fact, I wrote an article that was actually in Dive Newswire and also in this new scuba diving industry magazine on normalization of deviance, where people will take shortcuts. And when they take a shortcut and it works, they do it again because it did work. And so that's when people start getting themselves in trouble because they don't follow the same protocols you and I would follow when we dive. And so it's very, very important to make sure that you always follow those rules. And it can happen to anybody. In fact, Dr. Dick Van, who was our director of research at Dan for a while, he used to tell people that it's really like a roll of the dice. You just don't know. There are people who do follow the rules and do everything the way they're supposed to, follow what the guidelines on their dive computer, and still get decompression sickness. It could be due to some inherent medical issue that they may be dealing with. It could be due to almost anything because nobody really knows how to completely avoid the bends except not diving.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I
Yeah.
mean, what what shocked me, I think, what else shocked me is like even the fact of that I was gonna have a get together over at my house, and I have a hot tub. So I have a rule after diving, no hot tub, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Probably a good idea.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
However, when I first put this idea about having this barbecue out, I said, okay, we're going diving. So hot tubs out of use after the thing. And I had a couple of complaints, and I'm like, not in my hot tub, you're not.
Yeah.
And they're like, they had no idea that you could actually get bent from going in the hot tub after diving.
Yeah, I mean that was a question that we got when I worked at Dan was how hot should hot tub be? Well, nobody knows because we're not likely to do research on human beings to figure out what's going to happen if we put them in a hot tub. But yeah, that nobody wants to do that. Nobody certainly want to volunteer for that reason. Uh,
No, I'm out.
but I mean, hot tubs are okay, but it really shouldn't be too hot. But nobody knows how hot is too hot. So you may be a little bit warmer than your body temperature may be okay, but a really hot tub or really hot shower post dive, especially a very aggressive dive, is certainly not a good idea.
So what do you suggest for that? If you've done an aggressive dive, do you suggest like 24 hours before you like jump in a hot tub just to be
Yeah,
safe?
well, for one thing, I don't do aggressive dives. Not anymore. Not anymore. I mean, you literally would have to drag me to 100 feet. But yeah, I don't do aggressive. Well, since I'm 77 years old now, and I don't do aggressive dives. I still do dives, but I like to have long dives and good visibility and relatively warm water. And even though I do take trips a couple times a year to the Arctic or the Antarctic with these expeditions I do with Blue Green Expeditions, I'm very, very careful. And so the dives we did, for example, in Cuba, the average depth that we did was probably 70 feet, 60 or 70 feet. And we did spend a lot of time in shallow water, and I always, of course, do a safety stop, and sometimes I expand that safety stop by a couple of minutes, but depending on how I feel or if I felt I did more work than I normally would do during the dive, which I very rarely do because I like to take my time and really enjoy the dive, and that's what it's all about anyway. But even then, when I come back to the boat and want to take a shower, I try to make sure that the water temperature is maybe a little warmer than body temperature, just so it's comfortable and not take a hot shower.
So another question here, which we'll touch on briefly, is just what about alcohol after diving? Because I know that's a favorite pastime of a lot of people
Oh,
after
it
going
is.
to dive,
Yeah,
crack open beer.
and and again, nobody really knows. So I again tend to be conservative. So I will, when I do my dives, I certainly don't have an alcoholic drink right after the dive. I'll wait an hour or so. But again, it's nobody really knows. I just try to be conservative. And one thing too, people my age, we don't metabolize the alcohol as quickly as we used to when we were younger. And also, once you metabolize that alcohol, your body has to rid itself of those waste products. And this is all stuff that I talk about in a webinar that I do called "Safety Issues for the Older Diver." And so we talk about all the body systems and things that change as you age and how that affects your safety as divers, along with some recommendations about what you should do to mitigate those risks. But your body has to rid itself of all those waste products, and so I want to make sure that I'm ready and able and serious about diving the next day, and I don't want to have to deal with a hangover,
Yeah,
because you shouldn't be diving with a hangover. You shouldn't be diving under the influence, of course, of alcohol and anything else, any kind of drug. So I just tend to be very, very, very conservative because I want to continue to enjoy dives as long as I can.
which is amazing at 77 that you're still actively diving. I mean, how many dives a year do you do still at 77?
I'll probably do maybe 40, 50, 50 dives a year, maybe more. I do some snorkeling, for example.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Deadfoot Diver. Subscribe and share. Your support means the world to me. If you'd like to contribute directly, you can do so at the link in the description at buymeacoffee.com/deadfootdiver. Every donation helps me work towards earning my adaptive dive buddy certification, travel costs to help me assist other adaptive divers, and covering further training and equipment costs, bringing you on even more exciting adventures. Don't forget to check out my guest links in the description. And remember, grab an adventure and live.